Buzz History, and I have Rachel Isa Scott with me. I'm going to say all your names tonight.
All of them. Throw them all in there.
Why not? I'll probably switch between both of them just because we talked about it now. So, all right. I thought I didn't know anything about Osirian myths last week with Jason. I apparently knew more than I thought I did, but I absolutely know nothing short of that. What we're going to talk about tonight is some kind of a Neolithic village. Is that right? Of some kind. And yeah. I know that's pretty bare. Like I said, I don't really know a lot. There's not a whole lot out there for the general consumption about this.
There's not.
So first off, before we even go, what are we talking about? Because I want to hear you pronounce it.
So we are talking about Orkney, which is an island that is to the north of Scotland. And we are talking about the Ness of Brodgar. The Ness of Brodgar.
So wait, is the Ness a people or is that a thing?
The Ness, Ness, that is the temple complex.
Ooh, okay, so we have a temple complex. So obviously we talked about that, Neolithic people. I'm going to guess that they had some very interesting human sacrifices. They had to have human sacrifice, right?
I actually don't know anything of human sacrifices. But I know, bummer. But we are going to talk about a lot of dead cows and deer. They were, it's not great for like a, Halloween horror type episode or anything, but honestly, the people who lived in this cultural complex in Orkney during this part of the Stone Age, we don't even have evidence that they had any type of warfare. So in all of the stuff that we know about their everyday life, how they farmed, what they ate, that kind of stuff, the one thing that you're not going to find is a weapon.
Okay, so now I have a question because it just made me think of something that I did read about them. So I read that similar to Pompeii, how people were sort of putzing about their day, and then the volcano happened, the eruption happened, the heat happened, and it sort of left them exactly where they stood, bread baking or someone working on a pot or something like that. I read that something very similar actually looks like it may have occurred, not a volcano, but where the people sort of were just there and then stopped, like almost as though they were cooking something and then just walked away. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so to take a small step back and out so that we can kind of set the stage just a little bit so we all kind of know where and when we're talking about Orkney in the Stone Age. You have a lot of these tiny little towns. Orkney is pretty small. I say a tiny town. That's also by like our standards today. We're talking about maybe up to like 100 people. And you have them all within like a couple of miles of this temple complex that is comprised of a couple henges, which is your standing stones. Fun fact, this is where those come from and were created and invented, is Orkney in the Stone Age. That's where we get henges from. So we have the standing stones of Stennis, and we have the standing stone ring also at this same area for Brodgar that's attached to the temple complex. And then we have these little towns, kind of like Skara Brae, where we get these intertwined, weird little half under the ground, half above the ground stone apartment buildings that have these like weird little maze paths to get to everyone's houses. And then these little towns would have to come together or whatever it was they were doing at the standing stones and at the temples. And they also came together in order to build all of those things. And the temple complex at Brodgar took 1,200 years to build. So we're talking about like these little towns that had this really important thing in common that all of them worked towards to create for 1,200 years.
Okay, so why did they just you work hard for 1,200 years? What the hell?
Right.
What happened?
And then so that starts to be built around, I think it was like around 3,500 BC. So we're talking 1,000 years, 1,200 years prior to like Egypt and the pyramids. And they all have contributed stone and labor and resources for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And then they all go in to this, I think it was House 10, but I'm probably wrong, at the temple complex at Brodgar. They are going to pull into the temple, inside the temple, about 500 head of cattle. They're going to kill all of those cattle inside the temple. They're going to cook the meat, and they're going to have this huge party and a huge feast that had quite a few people. We're talking about like 1,000, 2,000 people at this party. And then when everyone is done eating and everyone's full, they take out, I don't know, hammers and shit, and they just start to tear down the temple. They smash everything. They take all of the bones and all of the body parts of the cows, and they pile all of the bones of 500 head of cattle right smack dab in the middle of the floor. Then they take dead deer carcasses, and they are going to lay those out over the top to create this sort of, to create a topping of dead deer carcasses. And then they take one cow head that has been decapitated, place it on top like a cherry, take all of the rubble from the temple, pile it up kind of around and on top of the stones, and they bounce. And that is essentially the end of this, you know, almost, 2,000 year cultural history in this part of Orkney.
I feel like I need to put my fingers through my hair and just declare aliens. Aliens, right? It has to be aliens. Just disappear. Like literally that's the end of it. They just go away.
And we have these, we have 1,200 or more years while this is being built, that you have a certain type of home structure, certain types of farming. There is this culture that goes from being within these towns or chiefdoms, although we're not really sure if they had chiefs, to being more of an Orcadian community that just at the end of this party, it's just, we don't see occupation at the sites anymore. All of the activity starts to move kind of south is where we see it for a while. And
if you had 1,000 dead cows, I wouldn't be there either.
I don't know.
I mean, how could you stand the stitch? 1,000 dead cows? Jesus, that's awful.
So I've had questions about this, right? Because like that's a lot of cows, and we're not sure. At least I haven't found anything saying exactly how many humans were at this party. So are we talking about like 500 head of cattle and like 1,000 people? Because that's only 2 people per cow. And then there's
average is like a pound of meat a person.
That's a lot of meat. Did they take doggy bags? And then how long did it take to pile up the shit on the floor?
Why did you have to kill deer? I don't understand. Why you had meat and then you need more meat? And then, I mean, this is not a Mongolian meat faucet location at the time. I don't imagine that someone's just standing there cooking meat over and over again.
I don't know. We do know that they ate deer. That was like a usual source of protein for them, but they also had cattle. They also had goats. They ate lots of seafood. They even, in their homes, so at their homes in Scarborough, at the really cool like Hobbit House apartment complex, they had tanks inside their home for the fish that they were eating. So they had the wherewithal and the, I'm going to say, technology to be able to raise their fish in their home, or at least be able to keep them in their tank so they can take them out in their, I mean, these are people who, like, they had it together. Like, we're not necessarily talking about the Flintstones here. Like, they were farming. They were using actually pretty incredible farming techniques. They were able to organize to get all of these henges up, which are still around. It helps that they made everything out of stone instead of wood, because it'll still be around. Stone and poop, basically, because poop is, that's like compost, and you can use that as like a mortar. So the stones are still around. They had it together.
You haven't used poop as a mortar, have you?
I've not.
No, you're working on your garden.
I've not personally used poop as a mortar, but I feel like there's some experimental archaeology that could be done here with like some stone and compost, Stone Age.
I feel like I've done a terrible disservice to the arts and sciences community. And here's my poop stone. You're welcome. You're welcome, Ines. You're welcome.
I documented it.
You can prove it. At least you'd have a primary resource.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, that was terrible SCA humor. I apologize for everybody out there who has no clue what that is. Okay, so, all right. If they had mortar, then they must have had, and fish tanks that kept living fish, because there's obviously fish tanks that don't. Did they have plumbing?
They did have very early indoor plumbing and proto toilets. Yeah, they absolutely.
More than just a hole in the ground, then.
Pretty much. I mean, because you had to have a way for that to, clear away from where you live. So it's not plumbing like what we would see, obviously, today. But I mean, they had it earlier than I think the Romans. Pretty sure.
Why have we not heard of these people?
Someone's gonna drop into the comments in YouTube and be like, "This bitch doesn't fucking know anything about Stone Age or the timeline or anything in ancient Rome, because all of her dates are wrong."
Don't feel bad. That happens to me on every history thing I do. This bitch doesn't know what she's talking about. But I'm the one talking about it, not them. If they want to talk about it, they should get up here on this stupid thing and talk to us.
That's true. That's valid. And what I can tell you is I have been down in this little hobbit hole apartment complex in Orkney, and it's pretty impressive. It really is. I mean, they had it together. They really had it together. They had a good life there, and especially being on like an ocean cliff in Orkney. Like, I don't know how many other people have had that special experience, but there is a kind of cold in your bones that you get standing on an ocean cliff in Orkney with like the puffins and penguins and shit around you. And having had the thought to plan that you have this like weird little winding maze that you have to go through, because they didn't really have doors, but because you had to go through all this like weird hallway shit, that's how all of that ocean air and the cold and the breeze and the sand stayed out. So it was actually like it would have been pretty warm in there. They were able to have their fire. They were able for that to escape through the ceiling. And then you have your toilet, and then you have your lobster tank, like at Red Lobster, ready to go. I mean, it's like, that's not a bad life for the Stone Age.
You know what? I know why they left now. You've just proved your point. They left because they did not have Red Lobster cheddar biscuits. If they would have had lobster cheddar biscuits, they would have not left. Okay, wait. I have another question now. I've got a little buzz on, so I'm prepared with stupid questions.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we know that I've already said this is aliens. I'm driving this point home, but all right. So if they just disappeared, where do you think they went? What do you think happened to them?
I don't think that they entirely disappeared. I think the cultural era, this culture that had built up around the time that they were building this temple complex, it created a culture that after this party where everyone just kind of raged, that culture stops. So at the point that they have the party, we've already seen that they have left these little hobbit apartments. So things are already kind of starting to disband. All that activity, the cultural activity, seems to have moved farther south, but that doesn't mean that all the people left. It's just that culture kind of left. Sort of like how at the end of ancient, at the fall of Rome, it doesn't really like fall and everyone's gone. It just kind of turns into Constantinople and Byzantine culture. This was the same kind of thing where they had this like culture going on, and then like everyone's starting to leave home and no one wants to stay at the family farm anymore because they were farmers. So like the kids left and whatever. And then they're just like, you know what? We spent 1,200 years trying to build this temple. We're going to go out with a bang. That's what I think happened.
Goddamn Orkney millennials. Orkney millennials ruined the culture. That's what I say. Ruin the culture. All right, so we don't have any documentation about any particular person. We don't know anything about anybody from that time at all. Anybody?
Don't know who was there. They did not write anything down. Or at least we don't, I shouldn't say they didn't write anything down. I'm going to correct myself. We don't have any type of records. Now, I will tell you a personal anecdote that is probably bullshit. But when I was in Orkney, and exactly, yeah. When I was in Orkney and I went in towards Scarborough, my tour guide took us down into one of the houses to kind of show us all the stuff that they had. And there was carving from the time that was put in the side of the bed. And he said that that was a charm, which would imply that... Yes.
All right. I just assumed. Just assumed. Continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I meant to interrupt. Go on though.
But also, in order for that to be a charm, we would have to have some kind of a written language. And I would think if they had a language, all of the people who are a lot more educated and smarter than me, who have spent their lives in the archaeology sites and in the history and have devoted all of their time and energy to this culture, would not then be saying that they didn't have written records. I feel like if they had the vocabulary to be able to write a charm, we would have evidence of that. Maybe it was just line art and the tour guide is trying to make a tip. I don't know. Or I could be wrong. Maybe they did. I don't know anything. Who knows?
I'm gonna go with his charm. Maybe it's just like hieroglyphics. Maybe it's not letters. Maybe it's like pictorial art.
It was, yeah, they had that like line art that they had, and a lot of line patterns. That's what it looked like to me. So yeah.
Well, if there was one thing that you would think you would like to like tell people about this culture that makes them as epic as they are, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's hard. Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I think it's pretty awesome that they're the ones to invent hinges, like how much has all of history and us even now today been so mystified by all of the standing stones, and this is essentially where we see this start. So I think that's up there. I think indoor toilets is probably up there. I honestly think the tanks of fish in the house, like that was one that got me. Like, it's one thing to farm, yeah, like they were doing all of these like super fancy farming techniques, and that's cool, but like they brought their food into their house to keep it fresh so they didn't have to go outside because Orkney is damn cold.
There you go. Smart.
Amazing.
You know what I think, though? I think you're just too scared to say it because you have your your historical hat on. What am I trying to say? Your historian. That's the word I'm looking for. Your historian hat on. You know that you want to say what it really was, don't you? What made the hinges? What made the pyramids? No, you want to say what it is.
Is it aliens?
Well done. I'm so proud of you. That is exactly what it was. It was aliens. I solved a, how many year old mystery is this? I don't know. How many million, thousands years old history is this?
How long ago is 3,500 BC?